Michael J.
So this week, it really is Modern Regionals this weekend, right?
Yep, Modern Regionals very, very soon. And it's kind of exciting because they've already announced that there's a change to the banned and restricted list happening on Monday.
So they're going to wait till after this weekend's festivities, and then stuff might happen.
Yes, I think this weekend's festivities might impact, it might be additive. I think the only thing that's like a done deal is Dig Through Time and Pioneer.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Who knows? We'll see. It's interesting because they announced that they want to do this, and it's kind of like a short notice one. So like it could be any format, but they care enough to want to do it now. And they don't have the results from this weekend yet. So it makes me think that there's at least one or more important changes they want to do that they already have sewn up. There's a lot of opportunity. So in Pioneer, we've long talked about, since the Pro Tour anyway, about the effect that Underworld Breach and Inverter have on the format.
Yeah. It's a wild format.
So far, Breach has not continued to have success the way that it did at the Pro Tour. It's done, okay, but it hasn't dominated. Inverter, on the other hand, has continued to be a problem. And to me, it seems pretty obvious they're going to do they're going to ban something in the Inverter deck, whether it's Dig Through Time or Inverter or something, or Oracle or Jace or something.
I mean, Oracle is just not enough.
I don't think banning Jace or Oracle even does anything really
if you
productive.
ban them both, like that's a lot.
Yeah, that's
not
true.
Much of
but
an
that's
inverter
not
deck.
That's not that interesting. But yeah, so I don't know. They'll probably ban something in Pioneer, but the format that seems like the most broken right now is Legacy. We don't talk about Legacy that often. Yeah, we can jump back over to Modern for regionals this weekend, but I mean Modern. Okay, maybe it does make more. So we talked last week a little bit about Grinding Station, Underworld Breach.
Yep.
Man. So I think that it's possible that you could make like a super duper busted fast version, but I think Pascal Maynard makes a really good argument about why you should play a turn 3 version instead of trying to do anything crazy. Like
I love how turn 3 isn't crazy. That's just a regular speed to win in Modern.
So one of the things he points out is how much you can grind. So basically the big one is that Grinding Station and Underworld Breach wins with any 0 as long as you have a mana. And since it's 2+2, the natural flow is that on turn 3 you'll have a mana. But it's like, and it can be any 0 you want. So it's like that combination is just unbelievable. If you try to add a bunch of other combos, like we talked about the top 4 list from the Open, maybe there's a mixture of all those that makes it worth it. But at the moment, I just don't see any of those combos making the deck any faster. It's not like you're faster than a turn 3 kill deck. So then you just have more combos instead of interaction. And it's like, do you need more combos? I'm not sure. Pascal Maynard's approach to Underworld Breach and Grinding Station is to just use, and this is still Modern we're talking about, not Legacy. Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. But the idea is to play kind of a quasi-normal deck that just has Grinding Station, Underworld Breach, and some zeros. And so, he's playing Teferis, Engineered Explosives, Mishra's Baubles, Emery, Lurker of the Lock, help find your combo, Cryptic Commands, Galvanic Blasts, Metallic Rebuke. So there's some things that are going on that are really sweet here. And you're still just winning with Thassa's Oracle, because what you eventually do is you mill yourself a ton, you find a Mox Amber, and then you can loop that over and over again because you use the one mana, that one mana I talked about earlier. You use that to play Emery, Lurker of the Lock, and then you can play Mox Amber, and then you can make an unlimited amount of mana, but you only need 2 because you just have Thassa's Oracle. Anyway, the the Galvanic Blast is really interesting because you can kill people really fast. If you have Metallic Rebuke in a reasonably stocked graveyard, like you might not even need to combo because sometimes you're just like grinding yourself for no reason. If you just, and like, even if your grinding station gets destroyed or something, you could end up in spots where the Emery milling, where you just go Breach, Galvanic Blast you 3 times, that's 12. You know, like, depending on how much your opponent's shocking themselves or whatever. But anyway, yeah.
I like that. That's nice.
So like Metallic Rebuke and Galvanic Blast and Cryptic Command and Engineered Explosives, that's a lot of interaction. And Teferi, it's a lot of interaction, but that's not all. The thing that people online haven't been talking about because it's kind of like a newer, it's like the version that got popularized this past weekend didn't have it yet, but it's Muddle the Mixture is actually just like that. You play, I think you can play a couple copies of Muddle the Mixture, which is the blue instant, counter target instant or sorcery spell, and has transmute 1 blue, so you can discard this card to search your deck for a card that costs 2, such as Grinding Station or Underworld Breach. So you get this 2-mana counter spell that could protect your combo or stop somebody else's combo, that can also be a 3-mana tutor for Underworld Breach or Grinding Station. And that's not even the end of it. You see, you can play 1 copy of Dance of the Manse. Dance of the Manse, obviously, it's that X-white blue. You put up to X target artifact and or non-aura enchantment cards, each with converted mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Plus, if X is more, which it never is in this deck, but if X is 6 or more, those permanents are 4/4 creatures in addition to their other types. So, first of all, for just 4 mana, you can get both Underworld Breach and Grinding Station out of your graveyard. So, like, if you played one and they countered it, and you play one and they counter it, then you can play Dance of the Manse and you win.
Which you just get it with your Muddle the Mixture, like transmute style.
Right. Like, and you can do other things too. Like, you might just Underworld Breach and use the Underworld Breach, like, or not even Underworld Breach, sorry, Grinding Station. You might just be grinding yourself and end up in a spot where you have a breach in your graveyard, where you could just Dance to the Manse and get back both Underworld Breach and a 0 or something. So anyway, Dance to the Manse. I
actually like the idea about maybe making 4/4s with it, you know? Like, maybe there's another way to win.
It is a backup. No, I mean, it's a backup way to win. It never really goes that way, though. Too many of the games, you're just killing them on turn 3 or 4 or whatever. Yeah, I mean, you could, but I don't know that it goes that way that often. I mean, your deck only has 20 land in it, so getting up to 8 is kind of like a tall order. And I think that the number of games where you actually end up I think it's just more likely that you might like deck somebody with Hall of Heliod's Generosity, which actually is another card that is kind of exciting in context here. Just like Dance of the Manse could get back your Underworld Breach, Hall of Heliod's Generosity is that Modern Horizons card that taps for a colorless, and you can pay 1 and a white and tap it to put target enchantment card from your graveyard on top of your library. So your Hall of Heliod's Generosity can be used so that, like, first of all, if all you have is Grinding Station, you can just be milling yourself, and then when you find the Underworld Breach, put it back on top of your deck with Hall.
Well, that's pretty cool. That's a very Volrath Stronghold kind of action.
And if you Emery, you can use Emery, find Grinding Station, and then use Grinding Station to find the Underworld Breach. Plus, if your opponent just counters or makes you discard the Underworld Breach, Hall of Heliod's Generosity can just get it back eventually when you're ready. Plus,
it's a powerful land.
And when you're milling yourself, when you're just like trying to go through your whole deck and win with Thassa's Oracle, there's going to be spots sometimes where stuff goes wrong. And it's actually not the worst backup plan in certain spots to just be like, yeah, I every turn am drawing Underworld Breach. And then when I Underworld Breach, I play the Underworld Breach and I Engineered Explosives something. And then it goes away. Or whatever. You know what I mean? Like you can buy yourself some time and possibly actually run your opponent out, particularly if your opponent's playing some kind of a weird deck where the only reason that they aren't dead yet is because they were able to actually stop your straight up kill. Like they already got your Thassa's Oracle or something.
You can just deck somebody with that card, right? Like if they're like in some weird situation where they haven't killed you and they're not going to kill you easily with a conventional means, you can just not lose.
Right. And then the other thing, so not only does Dance of the Manson Hall of the Heliod's Generosity allow you to get Underworld Breach back, you can use Teferi, Time Raveler, or Cryptic Command to bounce your Breach. Like you can play Underworld Breach, get Teferi out of your graveyard, and then use the Teferi to bounce your Breach.
Just so it doesn't go away?
Yeah, so you still have an Underworld Breach in your hand. You have a Teferi.
Play it, get a little action, and then...
Yeah, this deck is actually one that you can use to Underworld Breach for value a little bit. And then a couple other little interesting quirks about this one. So I think Muddle the Mixture is a big breakthrough. I think Dance of the Mance is a really cool one-of target. Muddle the Mixture also can potentially be used to find a bounce spell or something out of your sideboard if it really comes to that. But another thing that I really like about this deck is getting to use Blood Moon. Like it's not like you need that many multi lands anyway, and you're playing lots of fetches, and you got to play all the snow-covered basics and stuff for your Arcum's Astrolab. But then between Arcum's Astrolab, Mox Amber if you want it, or not Mox Amber if you want it, you do want it, but Mox Amber sometimes, Chromatic Star, and plus all just the basics that you got with your Flooded Strands and Scalding Tarns and stuff. But the Blood Moon is a great angle to have, and then the Tormod's Crypt is really a cool card out of the sideboard because it's also part of your engine. Like sometimes you just slow down the Dredge Person or whatever, or the Goryo's Vengeance deck or whatever, but sometimes you'll just use Tormod's Crypt because it's the missing piece.
It's a 0 because you have that combo of just having Grinding Station and Underworld Breach in a 0, right?
Right. Plus, it's just really powerful sometimes to draw 2 zeros so that you can just play Emery on the first turn. So I think this is a really exciting deck. Being able to play with, this is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 pieces of interaction and still be a turn 3 kill deck. That's pretty intense. And I don't know that this is even done yet. I don't know that this is necessarily perfected, but I think that this is gonna, when somebody finds the right version of this is, and I think for this weekend, I think this is an awesome choice. The biggest weaknesses to it are people who are like, if you're blisteringly fast, you could fight this if it's just a pure race. You
could just get them before they get you.
Like if you're like, say somebody else is playing like Infect. Infect is going to kill on turn 3 more often than this deck is, and this deck doesn't have a ton of interaction for Infect. It has a little bit, a couple Galvanic Blasts, a couple Metallic Rebukes, but it's not super well set up to be that fast at that. Another thing that's tricky is anybody who's just playing a Chalice of the Void deck. So if you're playing against like Eldrazi-tron, you can obviously they normally want to they normally want to Chalice for 1, but if they know what you're playing, and if you're playing this in a regionals tournament, word is probably going to spread about the shenanigans you're up to. But they can just drop a Chalice on 0, and it really slows you down because you can't even get it off the table with explosives very easily. In order to use engineered explosives to destroy the Chalice, you got to use Hall of Heliod's Generosity or like an Everflowing Chalice yourself. And I think you should probably play one of these anyway, but you got a couple outs to play it that way. Otherwise, you have to just sit around until you can eventually Teferi or Cryptic Command the Chalice.
Oh, that's not that bad, though. At least so you have an answer.
Oh, you have a lot of answers. I mean, you got like 5 answers, plus you have the parlay of one of your 2 colorless sources and engineer explosives. So you got some game, but it's not easy. Um, one of the things I really like about this deck, though, is that it is quite good against Primeval Titan decks.
Just because of the speed?
You have so much interaction and they have so little, and you're faster. They're just not equipped to compete with you. Plus, you have Blood Moon, and you can play Ashiok Dreamrender in the sideboard if you want, and you want to play Aether Gusts anyway. Like, it's just, you're well set up against Primeval Titan decks. And you're also, as far as, like, if you just play against other Urza decks, you're better because you're a little bit faster while also having interaction. They could be better if they changed what kind of interaction they were playing. But, like, the way that most people do it, you're just a little faster and have a little bit better of interaction. It's not like Thopter Sword is the thing that goes on. You know what I mean? Like, in theory, they can get something going where they just have infinite. But, like, you can win with Thassa's Oracle most of the time anyway. And then, like, even when they make a million tokens and have a million life, you're gonna Thassa's Oracle them on the next turn. You also get to play Factor Fiction out of the sideboard, which is actually, one, it's really cool to see Factor Fiction getting a good home. But two, it's like Factor Fiction is like a great tool for grinding against people who try to fight you by playing with 1-for-1 discard spells.
Just because Factor Fiction will always get you 3 cards if that's what you want, right?
Right. Yeah, and the cards you don't keep go to your graveyard.
Where you get the hookup.
Yeah, like you get to use them anyway. Like, think about this. You Factor Fiction, and one of the cards is Underworld Breach. Like, there are no good piles.
I don't know. Like, if you won for the Underworld Breach, like, that's not... I mean, I guess it's both fuel and selection.
Well, one, you have the option to take all 4 of the other cards. Right?
Yes, obviously.
And then, second of all, you're going to pick the Breach when it's even better than those 4 cards.
Yeah, I think you're gonna take the Breach when the Breach represents, the equivalent of the card you want in the other pile and the ability to deploy it and probably other value, right? Like, that's the thing, like value that's already there, something combines well with something in your hand, something like that.
And sometimes it's not just going to be raw quantity of material. If you have what you want anywhere in your graveyard or in those top 5 cards, then it makes a Breach Breach is giving you access to it. Remember, if they put a bunch of cards in the other pile, that's just more fuel for whatever you do want to Breach. Yeah. So Factor Fiction is great in this deck. In the sideboard, I think you're way too fast game 1, but in matchups where it's going to become a lot more attrition-y. So I think this is a really exciting strategy for Modern, and I recommend it for this weekend. The Legacy deck I wanted to speak to was another another sort of Underworld Breach deck. And as a starting point, I think we can do much better than this build, but here's a very respectable starting point, which is from the most recent Legacy prelim. Aegis was playing an Underworld Breach deck that on the surface it might be a little confusing what's going on here. Walk me through your process when you look at this list, what you're seeing.
All right, so I see some similarities to the decks that we've been looking at. So it's got Teferi Time Raveler and Underworld Breach, but it's also a Storm deck, right? It's got Grape Shot and Brain Freeze, but 4 Brain Freeze is kind of a lot for a deck that's got Grape Shot and only 1 Grinding Station. This deck has a ton of fast mana between Lotus Petal and Lion's Eye Diamond, so obviously Lion's Eye Diamond has very different, mechanics in a deck with Underworld Breach and has kind of that ability to exploit a 0 with Grinding Station Underworld Breach combo. Orm's Chant, Pact of Negation, I think those are there to protect the combo, I assume. I don't know. You're going to storm them out? Is that the goal here?
Yeah. Now, the interesting thing about this list is that aside from Underworld Breach, it's missing the best card. Infernal Tutor. So Infernal Tutor, so this deck, you're like, oh, what's the big deal? Why is Infernal Tutor so much better? This deck is using Ponder, Preordain, Brainstorm. It even has some Enlightened Tutors. You could argue about what's better, Enlightened Tutor or Infernal Tutor, but isn't Brainstorm, Preordain, and Ponder better? I would say no. And here's why. Picture Infernal Tutor and Lion's Eye Diamond together without even drawing Underworld Breach. You don't even need to draw Underworld Breach. You don't need to draw anything else. As long as you've got a mixture of some cards going to your graveyard and some mana, like if you have 2 mana by turn 2, which is not a tall order.
That's like standard operating procedure for most Magic the Gathering decks, sure.
If you have 2 mana and you have 9, like you have Underworld Breach, Lion's Eye Diamond, not Underworld Breach, sorry, you have Infernal Tutor, Lion's Eye Diamond, and 2 mana. As long as the rest of your cards in hand and graveyard equals 9 cards, which you can do from operations like Lotus Petal and fetch lands and stuff, you played a Brainstorm on turn 1 or whatever. As long as you've got 9 cards between those two, you only need 2 mana. And if you only have 8 cards between the two, you're still 99% to win. And if you have 6 cards between the two, you can go off if you have like a Dark Ritual, which this deck is also not playing. But if you have extra mana, then you need less cards. Basically, a good ballpark is that every extra mana you have saves you 2 cards between your hand and graveyard that you would need. Another thing that's really interesting is that drawing Brain Freeze actually speeds you up. And that's why you should play Brain Freezes in these decks. You see, here's the combo. When you go, let's say it's turn 2, and you Infernal Tutor with a Lion's Eye Diamond to play. You use the Lion's Eye Diamond in response and discard your hand. Now you get to get whatever you want from Infernal Tutor, because normally you get to draw a card of your choice that was already in your hand, but if you have no cards in your hand, you can get anything you want.
Yeah, so you go Hellbent from the Lion's Eye Diamond, and you have the mana floating.
Right, and so what you go get with the 3 mana is Underworld Breach. Or you go get with Infernal Tutor's Underworld Breach, and you use 2 of your 3 mana to play Underworld Breach, and then the first thing you play out of your graveyard is Lion's Eye Diamond. And then you use Lion's Eye Diamond again, and you have no cards in hand, who cares, right? And then you have 4 mana, and now you can, basically you just keep playing Lion's Eye Diamonds, Brain Freezes, and Infernal Tutors. You see, you build up a little bit where you just go Lion's Eye Diamond, Infernal Tutor, and then you Brain Freeze yourself for like 15 or whatever, which means that now you can play Lion's Eye Diamond a bunch more. You see, as long as you have Underworld Breach in play, every 3 cards you exile from your graveyard, it gives you 3 mana of any color. That's an insane conversion.
Wait, so if you're Brain Freezing yourself for 1 of you, right, out of the graveyard, you're still getting Storm copies, right?
Oh, yeah.
Wow. So this is just faster than Grinding Station, I guess.
Oh, yeah. I don't think you should even play 1 Grinding Station. They're only playing Grinding Station because they don't have Infernal Tutor, and you can go get it with Enlightened Tutor in their build. But when you see the deck, you see it's actually busted even if you have only 1 Underworld Breach in your deck. I would play 4 because I think it's even better, But
naturally drawing it's probably good times.
But it doesn't matter, really, that much. The most important thing is Infernal Tutor Lion's Eye Diamond. You see, Infernal Tutor is Flash, and Lion's Eye Diamond is Protean Hulk. When you have those 2 cards together, you win. But instead of having to play with like 7 dead cards in your deck, you don't have to play with any dead cards. None. Because Brain Freeze speeds up your kill and is the kill. And you can have as a backup kill condition Burning Wish or Lightning Bolt. You can have one copy of Lightning Bolt if you want. It's super easy when you do the whole thing to win. There's no reason to go to the trouble of playing like Thassa's Oracle or anything. You're way too fast. You should only just play a card that has like extra utility to you. But the point is that when you have Underworld Breach, every 3 cards you exile from your graveyard gives you 3 mana of any one color because of Lion's Eye Diamond. And then also the Infernal Tutor means that every 2 mana you spend and 3 cards you exile from your graveyard, you can Demonic Tutor. So on the average, you only have to exile 5 cards. If you exile 6 cards, you make a profit on mana and you get to Demonic Tutor. So like, as long as you can find a way to mill yourself for at least 6 cards, which makes Brain Freeze just unreal. You see, you can just Brain Freeze yourself really quick. And part of the reason that I mentioned that you're like outrageously likely to do it with 8 cards is that if you try to do it with 8, you end up just a tiny bit short where you actually have to exile your Brain Freeze. But or you have to exile one of the combo pieces to your. But as long as you flip another Brain Freeze, then you win.
Yeah, but
and you could also flip a bunch of other things too.
Living near the edge is one of the reasons you play these combo decks, I think.
Oh yeah, so it's busted. Basically, if you just have if you just have Lion's Eye Diamond and Infernal Tutor, as long as you have 2 mana in order to play the Infernal Tutor, and then you have 9 cards between your hand and graveyard, or you have some extra mana which reduces the amount you need, or you have drawn a Brain Freeze, you just win. So you can win on turn 1. Sometimes. I don't know that you want to optimize for turn 1, though, because it's just harder to have 9 cards extra between. It's just so much easier to do that if you play a card on turn 1. So I actually think the right way to play this deck is to just play with, like, at least, I don't know, like 4 Thought Seizes, 4 Duresses, whatever. You should build this like some kind of a Flash Hulk deck, you know?
What about like Thought Erasures Thought Scours or Mental Notes, those kind of cards?
I like Thought Scour in these decks. I don't know if you're actually supposed to play it or not, but I think Thought Scour is better than Ponder or Preordain. It just speeds up your kill so much. And the flipping stuff into your graveyard actually gives you a lot of play for the backup plans. Because, like, for instance, if you just flip Lion's Eye Diamond, it really does matter a ton. Or if you just flip Infernal Tutor, because remember, you could just go Underworld Breach. Like, if you drew the Underworld Breach, you could just play Underworld Breach and then use the Lion's Eye Diamond to get back the Infernal Tutor and then just go. And obviously, once we talked about, you do that little value Brain Freeze early on, which gives you enough cards so that then you can just combo some more Lion's Eye Diamond a bunch and then Brain Freeze again. And then, and the only reason you play 4, because you only really need 2. You don't even need the second one, but the second one is super good because you could pitch it. Like, you could afford to have something go wrong with it. And I think you want 4 anyway, because you just want to, like, you might want to exile it to an Underworld Breach thing. But the most important thing is the fact that if you just draw it, it speeds up your kill. So why not play 4? I don't know.
Wow, that is really busted. So do you think that they're going to have to ban Breach in every format? Like, that doesn't sound like Legacy is going to be very fun anymore.
I think that when people go make the Ruthless version of this, it's going to be unstoppable. It's like so degenerate. Like the fact, like when you're at the spot where you're like, why bother with Ponder? And maybe it's right to play Ponder. I don't know. But like when you can just play 12 awesome cantrips, 12 awesome interaction, your combo has almost like there's no dead cards. You don't need to play Grape Shot. You don't need to play Silence. I mean, you can play Silence if you want, if that's really the best thing. Maybe it is. I don't know.
Why would you play 2 Orms chant 1 Silence? That makes no sense to me.
I don't know. That's confusing.
Like
to me.
Somebody might just like, I don't know, like slaughter games you for Orim's Chant or something? That seems.
No, no, no. The real reason is because when you have silence, you can still silence your opponent even if they put Leyline of Sanctity in play.
Ah.
Because like this deck, in theory, you could lock them out, do your whole combo, and then play Teferi Time Raveler and bounce their Leyline and then kill them.
Okay.
So it is real. I do think that one silence probably, like I could imagine it. The thing that doesn't make any sense to me is why you would do it if you don't have Infernal Tutor to go find it in the first place. Are you really just digging with Ponders and Preordains? Maybe, I guess, but...
I mean, I was just assuming that this deck had decided that 3 copies of an Orim's Chant type effect was the right number, and then Aegis was deciding that like a 2-1 split was appropriate for some reason. And, you know, like the literally like the Slaughter Games reason was the thing that came to my mind.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, part of the reason that people aren't talking about it more is that there are a bunch of versions that people think are, they're like, oh, this is the tier 1 deck. Like, the popular way to play this deck in Legacy, if any version is popular, but the popular way is Delver of Secrets. They're playing like a Delver deck where it's like, oh, they have Delver and Force of Will and Daze and Lightning Bolt, and they look like a normal deck, but then they just have Lion's Eye Diamond, Brain Freeze, and but no, you don't have to play very many. That's the other thing, is that if you don't want to kill on turn 2, if you're actually just content to have it be part of your, to be a package that you have access to, like some of the people playing these decks are playing the only a few pieces of each of the combo parts. Like I think one of the ways to play this, I think Peter Vanderham wrote an article on Channel Fireball talking about his take on the archetype that uses, let's see, he's got 3 Infernal Tutor, 3 Lion's Eye Diamond, 2 Underworld Breach, and 1 Brain Freeze.
In like otherwise Delver aggro deck?
It's got like Delver of Secrets, Young Pyromancer, Force of Will, Lightning Bolt, Thought Scour, Brainstorm, Ponder, Thought Seize, Inquisition, Akosa. Like it's like a deck, right?
That's very like a deck. I agree that I would use the term like a deck. I think that as you've described it, this strategy is extremely powerful. I don't know why I would want to be messing around with 3/2s for 1.
I don't think you want to either. I think that what this is a case of, oh, somebody was playing a Delver deck, and then they put this combo in and it got better. While I believe that's true, I think you might want to just go the full Monty and keep cutting other things and put more of the combo in. I will give them some. I will say that Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger, is cute. I like it better in, like, I think, for instance, you might actually, if you're going to hybridize this deck with anything, I could imagine merging it with Reanimator, because Entomb is actually a decent tutor. And like once
it's a great tutor if you're just going to be playing stuff out of the graveyard.
And then imagine if you could play Burning Wish. Like, what if your deck is like has 4 Burning Wishes and 3 Infernal Tutors? Because all you want to do is go get Infernal Tutor in a lot of scenarios. But then that gives you backup kill conditions, interaction. It gives you, it does quite a bit. But you could also, in theory, have like 1 copy of Reanimate in your sideboard or something. So I don't know. I don't know if you want to go that route. But like if you're Entomb, if you had 1 copy of Kroxa, it's quite the backup plan.
Yeah, I think Kroxa sounds great. I mean, especially it's going to go to the graveyard naturally. Escaping is supernatural for that. It's in the right colors. I think I'd rather have that than just play a Reanimator strategy. Like it sounds like you could just play like a lot of redundancy or increase the frequency of your 1-mana cantrip type stuff by adding Thought Scour or even Mental Note. Like, I don't see why you wouldn't play Mental Note. Like it seems fine to me.
Do you think Mental Note is better than Brainstorm?
Well, no, but I think like if there's all kinds of extra cards in the deck as it is, like people are just playing rando stuff. Like maybe I'd rather have a mental note than some of the random cards.
Sure, I just don't know that you need to play any of the random cards, because if you just start playing 4 of all the busted cards,
Yeah.
like you make a deck pretty quick, right? Like if you're playing 4 LED and 4 Lotus Petal, and I would like to play 4 Dark Ritual. I mean, maybe I'm old-fashioned. I also think, like, why mess around? Like, once you try to go this fast, I think you have more incentive to play with discard spells instead of Force of Will.
I think Force Will is probably pretty serviceable here, right? There's tons of blue cards you can discard. There's Ponders and Preordains and Brain Freezes and Brainstorms and
You got no Force of Will. Force of Will is totally serviceable. And if you told me that the right build uses Force of Will, I could easily believe that. I just don't know. I guess I'm not sure how much Force of Will you would want, because the 1-mana discard spells are just so much more on plan. But if you end up having to slow the deck,
if you can get one of the 1-mana discard spells into your graveyard on turn 1, is that beneficial for some potential Underworld Breach flashbacks?
yes, if you're in a backup plan, and also it gives you a card in a good spot for your using as fuel to exile to get your engine going in the first place. If you Force a Will, that's one less card you have to work with.
Oh, yeah.
It might be right to do. It might be right. I don't know that 4 is the right number of Thought Scours. It might be that 5 is the right number and you're supposed to play 1 mental note. I don't know. Who knows? I just know I would cut a lot of this weird stuff like Spell Pierce and Cling to Dust and Plague Engineer and True Name Nemesis and Brazen Bar. Like, you don't need all that stuff. Just play with if you have Infernal Tutor, I mean, what do you think of Burning Wish?
I mean, it seems pretty powerful.
Right? Like, it's the cheapest way to go get your thing, to get Infernal Tutor, because all you really want to do is have ways to find Infernal Tutor. LED is like unreal to draw, but you can do really, really good things without LED if you have Dark Ritual and Brain Freeze.
Would you consider playing cards like Muddle the Mixture, like those kinds of transmutes to...
Way too slow.
Yeah.
Okay. I would play Grim Tutor before Muddle the Mixture, I think. Like, I think that the biggest advantage to Burning Wish is that only costing 2 is just so much cheaper and more realistic. The biggest drawback is that you have to only play with 3 Infernal Tutors in your deck, and that's just like the best card to draw. So maybe it's better to not play Burning Wish and to just get there with your Thought Scours and Brainstorms and Ponders and stuff. But I don't know. Burning Wish is also just so powerful that I kind of would like to live in the world where it's right to Burning Wish, you know?
I kind of want to play in a Legacy tournament after your description of this thing. Like, it sounds like a very exciting deck to play.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Plus, it's busted. Dude, so if you just play 4 LED, 4 Lotus Petal, 4 Dark Ritual, 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Duress, 4 Brainstorm, 4 Thought Scour, 4 Brain Freeze, 4 Underworld Breach, 4 Burning Wish, 3 Infernal Tutor, you still have room for a couple more cards so that you can play, I don't know, what do you want to play in a deck like this? 15 land?
The version that has white that's from the preliminary had 16 land.
And no Dark Rituals?
Yeah.
But they do have 12 1-mana cantrips instead of only 8. This deck probably wants more than 8. I don't know. Maybe you don't.
I don't know. I've never taken so much as a test draw. It seems pretty exciting, though.
Yeah.
I mean, like, so, how do you feel about Teferi? You got to play something like that?
I don't know. I don't think you want to have to get a 4th color of mana. Like, you really need fetch lands, not City of Brass types, because you really need the card in your graveyard to speed you up. And I think that you gotta like, you can play 3 colors pretty easily because you fetch on turn 1 and 2. But I also just think Legacy is kind of fast for Teferi. It could be okay. You could play Teferi if you were like aiming for a little bit more. Like, I think the more that you go like a Force of Will direction and try to slow the game down to like turn 3, I just think that Teferi takes you a different direction than the Infernal Tutor LED direction, you know?
Yeah, I feel like Teferi is just one of those cards. It's just like you're trying to set up your game plan over the course of multiple turns, I think, for a deck with this much mana, versus just getting there as fast as possible, which you might with the other.
Now, here's a question. Do you want to maybe, I mean, is there any chance Grinding Station helps? Because if you don't draw Infernal Tutor, you can still win immediately if you just have Grinding Station, Underworld Breach, and then either Lotus Petal or LED. Or Dark Ritual, actually, right? No, it's not an artifact. No, you need to have Lotus Petal or LED.
Yeah, I think Grinding Station's probably pretty good.
Like, I think if you were going to play Grinding Station, maybe the theory is that you can just not worry about tutoring to Infernal Tutor as often, because whenever you draw Grinding Station, it's just sick.
It's just so much stuff, right?
So I don't know. This deck seems completely busted in half.
Oh, it sounds like that to me. How do you beat it? Do you get it with like a Leyline of the Void?
Leyline of the Void is pretty good. Yeah, I mean, like for instance, the version that we were just talking about, the Aegis's build, the sideboard has 2 Wear and Tear, 3 Echoing Truth, and a Serenity that can be tutored up with stuff like Enlightened Tutor. Plus, Teferi can bounce the Leyline of the Void. Yeah, it's tough. The version, the Grixis Delver one, the Delver build, obviously you can beat Leyline of the Void by just playing with Delver of Secrets and Young Pyromancer.
Just attack them.
Right. So I think you need to have a plan for Leyline, because Leyline is just so... Leyline is the perfect card for stopping the insanity. But it's not like the deck's just dead to Leyline. It's just you can't do your busted things until you get Leyline off the table.
I mean, can't you just set up a storm type thing like regular?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you can just like lace together a couple of cards, or if you just just drew 2 brain freezes, probably do some damage that way. And by damage, I mean not actual damage, but
yeah,
reducing the opponent's library, not their life total.
Yeah, because if I mean, if the other person's drawing some cards and fetching and so on, as long as they don't kill you too fast, it's not like you couldn't just get that double brain freeze thing where you end up brain freezing them. Because you can build a nice little storm, where you're like, oh, I'll play. Okay, I hold my LED, I hold my Lotus Petal, and you end up in a turn where you're like, okay, Brainstorm, Lotus Petal, Lions of Diamond, Ponder, brain freeze again. It's not great, but it's not the worst backup plan against the best card in the format against you.
Yeah, I think that you'll win a surprising number of games by not giving up. Just finding the path, a la what you were describing. And I think that, like, if you're this archetype going into a tournament, you must know that the card Leyline of the Void exists, and you've got to figure out your plan for something like that happening.
Yep. You don't want to like transformational sideboard, do you?
I don't know about like, is there enough space? Right, like the thing is, like, transformational sideboards tend to work when like some of the cards you can still keep them. Like.
Yeah, oh yeah. But I just mean like a compact alternative combo. Like, let's see, what's a good example? If you like, I don't think you want to have to take out the Lotus Petals and LEDs, but the package of like the Platinum Empyrean, being able to just play Platinum Empyrean for 4 mana.
Yeah.
So I don't know, or it's not really appropriate for this list, but like you could play some kind of Leyline of the Void, Helm of Obedience. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty easy to set up. I mean, just looking at Aegis' build, if you're going to rely on Enlightened Tutor anyway, you can put that kind of stuff together pretty easily.
Another possibility is that you have like Sneak Attack and Emrakul or whatever. I don't know. I just don't think it's hard to that starts taking up a lot of sideboard spots. But
Yeah, I think this deck is just so. I mean, I guess like all of the tutorish type stuff, like all the brainstorms and all the ponders and pre-runs, you can just stay whatever configuration you are, right?
oh, you know what you could do? You could just have one ad nauseum. Like if you just have ad nauseum, like if first of all, you might just want one ad nauseum in your main deck anyway. I don't know, right? Like you're playing if you play a version that's like the one I was describing, not Aegis's, but if you're playing one that has Dark Ritual and the discard spells, nothing in your deck costs like more than one basically or
Other
zero.
than the ad nauseum itself, right?
Other than the ad nauseum itself, which doesn't check. But that way, like ad nauseum is an incredible backup plan. And even if they get a ley line, wow, can you just go find ad nauseum? And if you ad nauseum, you can just store. It's not even hard to storm them out. You're going a lot slower, but that's not the worst backup plan. That sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, I mean, I buy it.
So I don't know. Storm seems finding the perfect blend of Underworld Breach LED in some kind of a perfect Storm deck. Alternatively, you could just put this in a Belcher deck. No, seriously.
It's a lot of
Like,
space.
is it?
I guess the Belcher deck,
Already had LEDs anyway.
yeah. I mean, but it
I don't know.
wasn't playing a lot of this other stuff.
Well, it depends, right? Like how you're set up, right? Like don't play any of this other stuff. I'm saying, what if you just put one copy of Underworld Breach, 4 LED, 4 Infernal Tutor, and when you draw it, you draw it. That's probably bad.
I mean, I think that the Belcher deck, one of its virtues is its hyper consistency. Like, you're taking that away from it.
Well, Ancient Tomb. Yeah. Oh, actually, what about some kind of like Painter Servant Grindstone? That's not the worst transformational plan.
I mean, for the white version, I think, again, that's easy to set up. You have Enlightened Tutor. But for the black version, less so.
Yeah, true. True. So anyway, I think this is busted. In Vintage, I can only assume it must be busted. But it's probably a lot less busted. I think the Legacy version could probably beat a lot of Vintage decks. Like in Vintage, you can only play one Lion's Eye Diamond, and you can only play one Lotus Petal.
Oh, well, yeah, they've got them outgunned then.
Yeah, like, who knows? You can only play one Brainstorm. This deck might be better in Legacy than it is in Vintage.
Sounds like it. I mean, especially when you take all the nonsense out.
Yeah, I think that what you really want to do is build around around Infernal Tutor plus LED, and not get too hypnotized with the fancy. What do you think? What do you think? Would you play something like which style really suits you the best for Legacy? And then what is your recommendation for folks this weekend in Modern?
So if I were to play Legacy, that's really compelling. The description that you had for the deck seems really interesting, seems really powerful, seems like, and I mean, just the storm mechanic itself gives you some inherent resilience against any kind of permission control type stuff. So that might be exciting. But for both Modern and Legacy, I don't know. I'd probably just play the red deck. I feel like Eidolon of the Great Revel goes a long way in these matchups, and I enjoy it. And
In these
matchups,
okay, sure.
It's not in Modern. It depends on like how many Titan decks you're playing against and what kind of Titan decks they are, because the red deck's typically very poor against the Amulet Titan decks. And last week we were looking at a lot of different builds of Amulet Titan that were really popular. Also, I was checking out a lot of the prelim events in Modern in the past week, and there's like a ton of like aggro Eldrazi, which is also tough for the red deck. So maybe those are against that. If I didn't play the red deck, I think I would probably play some kind of green-white company deck, which is slower than the grinding station decks that you've been talking about for Modern, but I don't know. I feel like they're still pretty fast. They can win in turn 3. De facto win anyway. And they've got a lot more kind of plan B, which I enjoy.
Does the Grinding Station Underworld Breach dredge deck do anything for you? I guess it's not a Grinding Station, it's just Underworld Breach, but the Underworld Breach dredge deck, like Ben Friedman's list, basically the idea here is that you're playing a dredge deck, with Shriekhorn, Merchant of the Veil, Stitcher Supplier, Stinkweed, Aim Golgari Thug. You're doing that whole thing, right? But the state you're trying to arrive in is one in which you have either, like for instance, if you have Manamorphose in your graveyard when you Underworld Breach, every 3 cards you exile lets you draw a card. So if one of the cards you draw is a Dredger instead of your draw, then you dredge 4 or 5 cards and you're ahead at no cost of mana. And so you can just do this for as many dredgers as you want. And if you've got something like Desperate Ritual or Infernal Plunge, you can get ahead on mana. And if you get Tome Scour, you can loop, where you either go, like if you Tome Scour yourself, every mana and 3 cards mills you for 5, so that you're able to effectively convert a mana into 2 extra mills. And when you've got one of the rituals, you can convert extra cards in your graveyard, like into more cards, like more activations of the Tomb Scour. So I don't know. This seems pretty intense, right? Plus, like just being able to use Infernal Plunge on Stitcher's Supplier is just awesome.
If you were to play in one of these modern regionals this weekend, you're definitely in a Breach deck. Does that sound about right?
Definitely. And I think I would play a Breach deck, and I think I would play something like the Pascal Maynard style that we discussed earlier. But the Dredge version, see, the reason I don't like the Dredge version doesn't have any interaction, but the selling point of it is that it is extremely just like if you play against somebody who's reactive, you're just going to have inevitability through them. Like so many Dredge decks,
Yeah, I guess if you're not specific, well, I guess all these decks are just drawing a lot of potential splash damage, right? Like you're not even splash damage. I guess maybe they're the actual target in some cases. They're really, really subject to the opponent's sideboard, right? Like that's the only thing.
Definitely.
They're powerful, though.
That's because your game 1 is so good. But yeah, they are definitely subject to hate cards. But like the Maynard style is sacrificing a lot of the explosiveness to have 15 pieces of interaction plus a sideboard that includes Aethergust and Blood Moon Tormod's Crypt. He actually plays 1 Breeding Pool in his deck in some of his builds to support Veil of Summer. I love Veil of Summer, the card. I don't love having to play a 4th color, but...
Yeah, now that I think about it, I was really kind of enamored of that Teferi deck with the Dwarven Mine, and this deck just seems like faster, right? You actually kill somebody on turn 3 instead of just setting somebody up on turn 3 or 4. If this deck gets going, this strategy, like the Pascal version or another version, you just get them. And there's also like it's the argument that people can deal with a creature, right? Like, I have an Emrakul in play. What are you going to do about it? Like, there's cards just like Liliana that can help deal with that. Even though Emrakul's typically difficult to target, and people play those kind of cards. Versus if somebody doesn't have specialized cards against you, which they often won't in game 1, your Breach deck is probably just going to be really, really effective relative to other available archetypes.
There's so many little angles, totally, and there's so many little angles that give you just a whole dimension. Like, for instance, 1 copy of Mystic Sanctuary is so powerful because you're trying to mill yourself anyway with Emery and Grinding Station, and then your Mystic Sanctuary could just get back well, first of all, you could just get back Cryptic Command or whatever, right? Which is just good. But you can end up in a spot where you get back Dance of the Manse. Or you get back Muddle the Mixture. So that you're just, like, you can just convert a fetch land later when you've got plenty of land. You can just convert it into a Muddle the Mixture or a Cryptic Command.
That's pretty cool.
You know? Like, that seems pretty good. Or replaying the sideboard timely reinforcements is nice.
Oh, no. No. I guess you have me.
Well, awesome, dude.
All right. So you heard it here. Underworld Breach this weekend for Modern Regionals. Good luck, everybody.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see what they ban on Monday.
Right. Bye-bye, Patrick.
See you next week.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play Dredge, for jail or hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left